Hello, my name's Ruth and I'm from Gothic Decay and I make pieces of work that look like this. This is one I haven't really finished yet, but you get the idea. So today I'm going to show you how to dye your pieces of work. So I shall get this far out of the way because this dye travels. So I shall now introduce you to my very grubby cutting mat. This has been through many a journey, but it's not very pretty, but it works very well. So excuse the state of that. But it also, when you mop it up afterwards, you can use bits of fabric and create all kinds of nice new bits like this. So anyway, yes, it's a bit of a state, but it's fine for this purpose. What we want to do is produce something, because we're going to dye it onto this and then leave it until it's completely dry. So ideally you want something that you can move around, particularly if you have cats, because they are drawn to this like it's something else. It's like catnip to cats, you know what they're like. They like to sit on everything they're not supposed to. So this is our original picture, but I'm going to just make it a little bit more colourful than this, because this is just basically black and white. So I'm going to use some walnut ink and Brusho. Now walnut ink is, well, I don't know what it is really. Crystallised bits of walnutty stuff, I can only assume. So you mix that with water, or you can just sprinkle it on directly. It's very strong stuff, so you don't need a lot of that. Same with the Brusho. I'll just show you quickly. Now this stuff really does travel a long way, and you will be very many bright colours by the end of this, but just be careful. So use old, plenty of plastic down if you're going to when you do this, just to so you don't get dye all over the place. So what I shall first do is colour this all with walnut ink. Now I shall also have to excuse my palette, because somebody who shall remain nameless used it for oil paints and didn't clean it. So we'll just sprinkle a few of these into there. Now, I think perhaps they like warm water better, because they tend to sort of clump a little bit. So just give them a little stir. Now sometimes, if I'm just going to use, for the brightly coloured pieces, I tend to just use Brusho. So I will then spray, again borrowed by somebody and now not a very nice colour, spray this until it's sort of wet all the way through but not sopping. And then sprinkle the dye on top, which I can show you later. Or of course you can mix it like this. Something like a jam jar is very useful, just to mix the colours together and produce all kinds of different colours. You don't have to just use the specific ones that are here. So we'll just find a little corner which is going to be nice and dark anyway, and then test it to see whether it comes out a nice colour. Now I think that's the kind of colour I'd like, so I just paint this with that. Now if some of it, for example around the window, I don't want it to be that dark, so I'm going to spray it first with water, and then it'll be much paler when it finally gets there. So we'll just give that a little spray to protect it, and give this a good coat. Watch out for these little sort of frilly bits, especially the bits on the back, because sometimes they don't take the dye instantly, so they end up staying white. You don't really want that. So this is just a kind of like a base coat, for want of a better way of putting it, so that it's all nice and, well, Gothic Decay, I suppose. Now it will spread into these areas, so just give them a bit of extra caution. You can always paint the detail in later. As I say, this is just the kind of base coats, but you can see how already it's all the different pieces of fabric are taking things up, taking the colour in different ways, and the little patches, like these little marks here, are all going to show through into the finished work. Well, show through at the moment. They might not by the end of it. But we're just going to take the take the take the white colour out of it, I suppose, but kind of blend everything together, so already it's starting to look like more of a unified piece than lots of bits of fabric that have been stuck together. See, now I'm making a mess, but that's alright, it's my palette. So don't worry too much about getting it really close. You can always do that, as I say, later. It's much easier to paint on a bit extra then when you've done, rather than trying to get rid of bits that have all spread in the wrong way. Now undoubtedly, because you're all watching me, as things always happen, as you all know by now, only when you're watching, that they're going to run out of ink now. There we go. So we'll make a little bit more of that. Yeah, we can always add a little bit extra colour in, but it's hard to take it out. So just put a few little. It doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same colour, because that's why it's all scrappy and patched pieces, you see. Now you'll notice here that some of the bits, I haven't stirred it for quite long enough, so some of the bits of dye didn't dissolve properly. I mean, you can sort of scrub at them a bit sometimes and help them to, well, not again. Now these are the things that happen. You just have to go with it. There we go. So we'll be doing a lot of the darkening of the edges later, but we just want the kind of background colours to start. Now, one thing that you need to remember, ideally, if you can possibly manage it, you need to let this dry naturally. Just keep it on its mat and just let it do its thing. Because sometimes the backgrounds, all kinds of weird little marks happen, because say like here there's little ridges in it. Sometimes they kind of create different shapes and things, that different patterns in the background, which are totally accidental, but we like them. So there we go, that's that bit done on a very basic level. So looking at our original picture again, I always think it's nice to put in a little tiny touch of yellow, just to sort of draw the eye towards the window. Now, as I say, this stuff travels very well. I have seen people just put a little little hole in the top and use it like a salt and pepper shaker, but a little paintbrush sometimes works too, just to sort of dab the tiniest little number of crumbs, for want of a better word. Seriously strong stuff. Again, don't worry if it goes outside the lines. This is all just the sort of base coat painting, so it's not the end of the world. And this is one of the things I like about this type of work, is that nature gets to play a big part in it. Now, when you've got all these little grains, sometimes they don't blend in terribly well, and you end up with those sort of like little speckledy bits, which are fine, but you have to be very careful when you've finished, because then when you put it up and you put it on your wall, these grains sometimes fall off, and then of course your whoever buys your piece of work will end up with a bright yellow, in this case, room, which they don't necessarily want. So sometimes you just poke them with your finger, or a paintbrush if you're a bit more grown up than me. There we go, and you've added in a bit of colour. So I shall sprinkle some brown into here. I'd like the wall, I think I'm going to decorate it with, you know, like a sort of, like a peeling wallpaper almost. So I was going to put some stamping on top of that. So I'll leave a lot of that, but I'll put some of the brown into this side, just to sort of add in some more textures and colours. Again, you don't need very much. It's very, very strong. That's the one I've already used. Oh, a little bit of terracotta. This one's a little bit too red, it's sort of, but a tiny bit of it in there is quite nice just to break up the brown. There we go. Ah, I knew there was some green somewhere. Sometimes a tiny, tiny little bit of green. This is quite an excitable colour. Well, I might use the paintbrush actually. Sort of suggest things growing out of the window, or maybe growing into the building. Seems to kind of have, for want of a better word, blue bits and yellow bits rather than, as it were, green. I want too much of that teensy little bit. And then the old spray again. And just move the dye around with the spray. Now you may rightly be thinking that I haven't put on very much onto here, which is very true. But I just want to make sure that it's always better to not quite add enough and put some more on than end up with a big dollop of something that you can never get rid of. See what I mean about that terracotta? It's an unusual kind of terracotta, I think. So we'll put plenty of the brown on. Whoops, it's quite a lot. There we go, that's better. And if you don't have Brusho, that's fine. Inks will work well. Paints, you can use acrylic paint if you water it down a little bit just to stop it being a sort of shiny, really. Whatever you've got, really. Just watercolours. This is just what I happen to use. Makes your fingers go funny after a while, no? Okay, there's quite a lot of water over here, so we'll just spread it around a little bit. So there we go. We're going to just leave that to dry now for probably a good couple of days. Depends what the weather's like. Try and keep your cats off it if you're anything like me. And things like this, you'll see there's a kind of, I don't know if you can see it on there, but there's a little ridge been made in the cloth. That might well have some kind of unusual, interesting dye things happen, and that's always quite fun. You can, if you'll see, there's probably quite a bit of excess just peering down there when you tip it. You can just put that onto a piece of fabric and just get rid of the excess so there's not quite so much to dry. But yeah, leave it to dry, and hopefully in a few days we'll be ready to come back to it and see how we go. And here we are after about, say 24-ish hours. Amazingly for Swansea, it's been nice and dry, so this is actually dried quite reasonably successfully. Now, as you can see, leaving it on its background like I did, just letting it dry by itself, all these funny little marks have appeared, like I was trying to explain to you before. I quite like all of that little sort of added extra texture, so that's perfect as far as I'm concerned. But as you can see here, These aren't as pale as I'd like them to be, but that's alright, we just add extra things into them later. So you can see the difference in the three pictures, how the picture I showed you last and how we ended with the work. It all was kind of quite speckly still when you leave it, and it all kind of spreads out and merges together. But as you can see, this yellow has travelled all the way over here, which is not where the windows are, which is there, but never mind. I think this is probably a bit of blue that it's picked up from my cutting mat, but it's absolutely fine. We just we allow nature to help out with these things, and sometimes nature pops in little bits like that just mean that it challenges you for a little bit. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Next we'll be working on actually turning this into our finished piece. Well, you know, working on it from there. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and click the little notification bell so that you know when a new video goes up. And feel free to pop along to Gothic Decay to see more finished pieces. So thank you very much for watching.